I think I may be one of the few people on the internet who has praised Thomas to death. But I mean, I can't help myself. This is my favorite franchise ever for a number of reasons. Whether it be from its impressive model work or CGI animation, to its likable and interesting characters, to the kick-ass OG theme song. I still can't get enough of this awesome theme song. Owl House's theme song is a close second, but this tops all TV theme songs by a long shot. Huge props to Michael O'Donnell and Junior Campbell for creating an absolutely legendary theme song. But theme song aside, there are also a number of great episodes across the series, mainly from the three eras I love so much. But today, I'll be going over what I think are the best episodes from each season. Now, I can see you putting on your best nerd emoji face and going, did you do one of these a couple of years ago? Why are you doing it again? Well, for one good reason. My opinions on my favorites from some of the seasons has changed a decent amount. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this thing. Season 1 is best known for laying the groundwork for what was to come. I mean, who could forget such gems like the Flying Kipper, Thomas and the Breakdown Train, the sad story of Henry, Off the Rails, Down the Mine, etc. But my personal favorite from this season has to be Percy Runs Away. This was the first time we got to hear the kick-ass Runaway theme in full, and it is so great. And it was so surreal hearing this in The Adventure Begins. Anyway, this episode is also notorious for its restored version's lighting being so dark for some reason, compared to the lightness on the original VHS version. Personally, I don't really mind it one bit, though I do see where people are coming from with it. Lighting aside, Percy Runs Away is great, mainly because of the Runaway theme being in full. And Gordon and Percy's dynamic was nice as well. Flying Kipper though, that is a close second for sure. Season 2 was a definite step up from Season 1 visually and model making wise. Ringo's narration was better, the stories were noticeably improved, and the new characters such as Duck, Doll, Douglas and Boko were a delight. And there are so many great episodes this season. Edward's Exploit, The Deputation, Thomas Comes to Breakfast, Saved from Scrap, fucking Ghost Train, etc. But if I had to pick my favorite episode from this season, I would 100% have to go with Old Iron. I always enjoyed the Edward and James stories of the series. This was something that the TV series played with a lot. Episodes like Keeping Up with James and James the Second Best are two prime examples of this formula. But Old Iron is easily the best of the bunch, with an exciting chase sequence on top of that. Ghost Train, though, is a very close second due to the spooky atmosphere and that jaw-dropping opening music. It's no secret that Season 3 is my favorite season of the entire show. From the introduction of Michelangelis, to the vibrant colors of the set design, and its absolute gems like Henry's Forest, A Scar for Percy, Gordon and the Famous Visitor, Time for Trouble, and its absolute slappers that are Escape and Oliver Owns Up. But my favorite episode from this season, hands down, is Trust Thomas. I already talked about this episode in my character highlight reel episode on Thomas, and I still stand by what I said about that. so I'll try and keep it brief here. Thomas is at his best in this episode. The music is great, as is all music in Season 3 and the classic era, and it has an absolutely stellar crash. Escape and Post Train, though, are a very close second, mainly for their stunning atmosphere and scenery. I may not love Season 4 as much as others, but I still love this season for what it did, from its stunning visuals to its likable and interesting new characters. However, the continuity for most of the second half of the episodes is all over the place. Not to mention the overwhelming but still alright Christopher Audrey stories. Nevertheless though, this season still has its gems, like Grandpuff, Sleeping Beauty, Fallen Legends, etc. However, my favourite episode this season is Thomas and the Special Letter. Main reason for that is because it kind of feels like a celebratory episode, with mostly all of the characters being present, along with a quite brutal but great crash and a very interesting story. Paint Pots and Queens, despite the massive continuity error, is a very close second for me, mainly because of the inclusion of the Queen of England. So, despite its flaws, Season 4 is still a great season all around. Season 5. The final season of the Golden Years. While this season may not be perfect, it's still an amazing, chaotic, action-packed, and cinematic adventure from start to finish. However, my favorite pick for best Season 5 episode goes to Cranky Bugs. Yeah, I know, the premiere episode of the 5th season is the best of said season. This episode sets the groundwork for what Season 5 would be. Great music, a fun and unique new character in the form of Cranky, and a spectacular crash.
Help!
Brilliant. This episode is Cranky the Crane's introduction into the series, who would later become one of the regular series mainstays. What I love the most about Cranky is that he's one of the few newbies this season that's not created for the purpose of merchandise. Plus, I love his moments during this season, and what they do with him later on in the CGI series, even in the terrible Nitrogen era, was incredible. I could go on about Cranky for ages, but I'll save that for another time. Or you could just check out Talk Soto's finest on the character for convenience. So, Thomas and the Magic Railroad got released. And while I do have a soft spot for it still, you could definitely tell where the show was going after the movie. Season 6 was the first season of what many would call the Ghislaine era. Season 6 was the only season solely produced under Ghislaine, and yeah, this was when things started to go south. A new team of writers were brought on to write new episodes for the series, with a few even staying on for years to come, such as Paul Larson and Lee Prescott as examples. Even some of the Bob the Builder writers like Simon Nicholson and Ross Hastings were a part of the writing team, which was pretty cool. But even with that said, this season is quite flawed. But that doesn't stop it from having its gems, with my absolute favourite of the bunch being Thomas and the jet engine. The way how this episode plays out is absolutely hilarious. Not to mention the absolutely phenomenal narration from Angelus.
The driver tried to put on the brakes, but Thomas couldn't stop. Oh boy! Signals were changed and points were switched. Thomas had never been so excited.
I don't know what type of microphone they were using for Angelus, but I'm all for his phenomenal narration this season. Even in Middle Engine, he's still amazing, despite how awful Middle Engine actually is. There are some other episodes I love, like James and the Red Balloon and Gordon Takes a Tumble as examples, but Jet Engine still manages to be the absolute king of this season. I just don't see how any other episode can top this one. It is easily the best Ghislaine episode by far. Season 7. The last of the classic era. The last to have the classic 4.5-minute runtime. The last to have the original theme song. The last season to be directed by David Mitton. And the last season to have music by Michael Donald and Junior Campbell. But oh boy, Season 7 is one hell of a season production-wise. This was the first full-on season to be produced under Hit Entertainment's ownership of Ghislaine, and it really shows for the US stuff. I feel quite bad for the Americans who got a different taste on Season 7. As for where I stand on the season, it's a very nice season. Nice and calming, just how I like it. Even if there are some stinkers thrown in here and there. As for my pick for best episode, I was gonna go for Gordon and Spencer, but after a while, I decided to go with 3 Cheers for Thomas as my favorite. I love what they did with this episode. This episode serves as a sequel to Thomas and Bertie from all the way back in Season 1, and I just love it. It sets the groundwork for Thomas and Bertie racing every now and then in the Reddit era, best shown in Lost Treasure. However, what I love about this episode is Thomas himself. At one point in the race, the Fat Controller stops Thomas and asks him to collect the Sports Day medals from Knapford, and immediately Thomas forgets about the race to help out the children, which as a result hands over the win to Bertie. This episode isn't all the characters come together type of story. No, it's a nice cap-off of Thomas's character arc across the classic series, and how far he's come since the first season. And that ending was just so sweet. A wholesome end to the best era of the franchise. Now, I know this technically doesn't count as a season, but I'm including the Jack in the Pack spin-off just for the sake of it, because it was filmed alongside Season 7, but didn't get released onto home media until 2006. Nevertheless though, I've always found the Jack in the Pack series to be incredibly fascinating. Like, the sheer size of the machines are just immaculate. You could really tell the amount of effort the team at Ghislaine had when constructing these guys. No pun intended. But when picking out a favourite episode for this spin-off, I think it shouldn't come as a surprise for one I've picked. And that is Thomas's Trusty Friends. Mainly because of the antics that this episode has. I just find it so funny that no matter how much Oliver tries to knock down that wall, it just won't come down. But by far the best and most impressive part of this episode is without a doubt the crash sequence this episode brings to the table. This crash wouldn't have looked as amazing if it was CGI. The fact that it's a giant tower falling down is just so impressive. And apparently the crew will only allow one take to make this happen. And my god, it succeeded on all levels. Especially with this funny bit of humor at the end.
Ouch, said Oliver. Ouch! Ouch! Ouch!
Easily the best Pack episode, hands down. Season 8 was the first proper season under Hit's ownership. New team, new sets, new everything. A new theme song, interactive learning segments for younger audiences, a new runtime, you name it. The only thing that carried over was Michelangelo's as the narrator. And while I don't really mind his narration for seasons 8 through 11, for the most part, you could definitely tell that he was starting to get a little bored as time went on. That was until the Nitrogen era when he got his energy back. Season 8 has quite a few good episodes. Squeak, Rattle and Roll, James Goes Too Far, Thomas Everly and the Snowplow, and a few others. But it's not without stinkers, like Everly's Adventure or Chickens to School as examples. But it wasn't hard picking my favourite from the season. If you've been watching my channel, you know exactly what it is. It's Thomas to the Rescue. Of all the episodes this season, this one definitely stood out to me a lot. Mainly because I have a lot of nostalgia towards this episode. I watched this episode a lot when I was younger. I really enjoyed Thomas's little arc he has in this episode, and I enjoy the moments when he helps out the Diesels. The music is also quite great at this episode, and it easily boosts it up in my opinion. I do also enjoy James Goes Too Far and Squeak, Rattle and Roll, but Thomas to the Rescue will always hold a special place in my heart. After the dragging bore fest that was calling all engines, we got Season 9. This I think is on the same level as Season 8 for me in terms of quality. It's slightly better than 8, but only just. At least it's a better watch than the movie, that's for sure. This season also has some great episodes, but I bet you guys can guess what I picked as my favourite episode of this season. Yeah, it's Respect for Gordon. This episode has been talked about to death already, but for good reasons too. It's one of the best written episodes of the Hit era, and I think this is the best Steam Team focused episode in the whole era. I really like how all the characters in the episode is in the wrong, and has a bit of a learning arc. Not to mention that the crash scene is quite impressive, I must say. One of the most brutal ones in the entire era. In general, I think that the Gordon episodes were some of the standouts of the era. There were some other ones sprinkled in here too, but Gordon definitely had a lot of standout episodes during this time. And this is easily the best Gordon episode in the whole Hit era. Season 10 is quite an average season if you ask me. Not to mention that 2 of my bottom 5 picks in the entire era are part of this season. But I'd be lying if I didn't say there weren't some hidden gems in this season. My personal favourite though is Thomas and the Treasure. I think this is one of the more creative episodes in this era. Salty gets some time in the limelight, the sets, while quite gimmicky, are still very good set pieces. And I really like the overall story. Though, when it comes to the finding the treasure plots, I think Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure did it 1,000 times better. But I still love what this episode was trying to achieve. One of the better Thomas-centered episodes from this era in my opinion. There are some other gems from this season, like Duncan's Bluff, James' Second Best, and It's Good to Be Gordon as examples. But I still stand by that this is a great Thomas-centered episode. It is a season that's half mediocre and somewhat bad. Season 11 is my favourite season in the Hit era, but it still doesn't hold a candle when compared to the first 7 seasons. Not to mention that my most hated Thomas character is a part of this season. But aside from that, this season's still solid. But if I had to choose my favourite episode from this season, it would have to be Thomas in Trouble. This was the very first Thomas and Friends episode that I ever saw, and man, is this a great episode or what? It's probably the closest thing we've gone to the Railway series story out of Puff, and it's once again another one of the better Thomas-centered stories of this era. I love how teasingly James is at first to Thomas, and I even like how Emily is concerned about Thomas, which is a nice callback to Season 7. And I really like how Thomas reluctantly keeps going despite his problems. I love his stubborn reactions. Very Season 5 Thomas to me. There are also quite a few other gems in Season 11, like Gordon the Engineer, Cool Truckings, and Hector the Horror as examples. But Thomas in Trouble will always hold a special place in my heart. It is, in my opinion, my favorite episode of Season 11. We're into the Dark Ages, folks. It's no surprise that Season 12 is my most hated season of the show. There is just nothing that makes it stand out compared to the other hit seasons. The CGI hybrid is terrible, the pauses in between dialogue is jarring, and the narration for both dubs is at its absolute worst. I love Angelus, but he was just really poor this season. Now, this season barely has any good episodes, and some of the ones in this season are some of the worst in the entire show. But if I had to choose one, it would probably be Heave Ho Thomas, but not by much. Because again, the episodes here range from mid to just plain bad. But let's just hold our breaths for much longer, because we still have 4 more seasons to cover. Season 13 was a really bad first impression for the CGI seasons, especially coming right off the heels of Hero of the Rails. It was hard picking my favorite episode this season, as again, most of the episodes here are so bad. I was hesitant on picking Splish Splash Splosh as my favorite from this season, but now I just find it decent. A guilty pleasure for me. So I have to go with Tickle Pink as my favorite from this season. I just think it's kinda neat seeing James in an undercoat. That's something that you don't see all the time in the show. The closest we got was Thomas being in an undercoat when he was repainted blue in The Adventure Begins. But this is still a nice episode. There are some other decent episodes of the bunch, like Snow Drax and Hero Helps Out, but Tickle Pink is the least bad of Season 13 in my opinion. I mean, what is there even to say about Season 14? It's Season 13, but worse. Especially since we have these 3 idiots. How come they went from being alright in the movie to just being chaotic messes in the seasons following? And what is there even to say about the episodes? Like, again, most of them are either forgettable or just plain awful. But if I had to choose my favorite from this season, it would be Victor Says Yes. Mainly because I quite like Victor's motive here. He wants to help his friends the best he can, but he is struggling to cope with it all. Quite relatable actually, given my position at this point. And Arian Bird made a return as well. That was nice. But aside from that, and maybe only Dignity, that's all I can say about Season 14. What is there even to say about Season 15? Like, what am I supposed to say about it? It is a contender for the worst season ever. The majority of its stories are so shit, and some of them are even amongst my top 10 in the whole Nitrogen era. And we all have Sharon Miller to blame for that. Look, I'm not trying to harass Sharon Miller or anything. I'm sure she's a nice person in real life, and her voice directing work in the seasons to come after Season 16 are great. But when it comes to her writing, holy mother of Titan! Is she awful at writing or what? As a result, it made it nearly impossible in picking the best episode of this season. So I had to go with my gut and pick Emily and Dash as the least awful of the season. This episode, along with Gordon and Ferdinand and Toby and Bash, are the least bad Logging Locos episodes in the whole era. I don't know, there's just something about the warbling whistles that just makes it so charming. But no, I'd much prefer to watch Once Upon a Swamp than this. And you'll know why. These three idiots made the Nitrogen era a slog to watch. They're not as frustrating as Billy, but damn, they're still annoying to watch. But yeah, the Logging Locos trilogy and Edward the Hero are the only least awful episodes of this abysmal season. Whilst the rest of the season could just rot in hell for all I care. Alright, we've only got one more season, and the nightmare is finally over. Season 16 is the least bad of the Nitrogen era in my opinion, but watching this after the Greatness Blue Mind mystery brought out was nothing short of overwhelming. There are still some stinkers sprinkled in, but at least there's still some more decent episodes this time. My favorite of the bunch this season is Thomas and the Sounds of Sodor. There's just something about this episode that I actually quite like. A famous composer coming to Sodor is actually quite neat. And I do kind of relate to Thomas here. Having noises distract from the silence does frustrate me a little. But that's not the only good ep of the bunch this season. Happy Birthday Sir, Don't Bother Victor, and Welcome Stafford are also some quite decent episodes this season. But don't even get me started on episodes like Percy and the Monster Friendom and Race to the Fucking Rescue. Anyways, the Dark Ages are finally over. And from here on out, it's all uphill from here. Season 17 was such a breath of fresh air because I'm finally out of the dark era and I can finally have some fun with the Thomas season again. There are so many great episodes this season from the likes of Henry's Hero, Bill or Ben, The Thomas Way, Kevin's Cranky Friend, and Thomas's Shortcut as a few examples. But my favourite of the bunch this season is without a doubt the Smelly Kipper. This genuinely feels like something that Christopher Audrey would write. In this one, James is challenged by Henry to take the Flying Kipper, and the results were a treat to say the least. It definitely gave me a good chuckle. This definitely feels like something out of season 6 or 7. There are some others I love, but this one definitely stood out to me the most. And that ending was really funny as well. Huge props to Brenna for making this one a treat to watch. Season 18 was definitely a step up from Season 17, but even so, it's not without its flaws. But the highs this season were very high. So many great episodes came out this season, such as Toad's Adventure, Thomas the Quarry Engine, Not So Slow Coaches, Thomas and the Emergency Cable, Duncan and the Grumpy Passenger, and especially Last Straight for Christmas. But whilst I love that episode, it doesn't come close to the absolute chad that is the debut episode, Old Reliable Edward. My pick for the best episode of the season. Remember Edward the Very Useful Engine from Season 6? Well, all that was wrong about that episode, this episode did 100% right. And it even takes it up to a T. T, literally, because I love the way how Thomas gives Gordon his comeuppance. This is the Thomas we love seeing, not the Thomas that screws up every single job he is given. And what Edward says to Gordon was just funny as hell.
Oh, but I didn't think you needed any help from me. After all, I'm so old and unreliable.
I'm sorry, Gordon, but you just got owned by Edward. Season 19 was where things started to really step up. The animation was loads better, the story started to get experimental like Season 5, and need I even mention the goated performances of John Hassler as Thomas and Nigel Pilkington as Percy? And the gems this season has is immense. The Philip episodes, Best Engine Ever, Goodbye Fat Controller, Thomas the Babysitter, Snowflakes Like Home, and Dead and Dart as examples. But my personal favourite episode this season is without a doubt Lost Property. This is by far the best usage of the overused comic relief Fat Controller. The way how he just plays with that paddleball and eventually giving himself a black eye is just so funny to me. The Beast of Sodor also made a really good example of how to use the comic relief Fat Controller. And I also really like how Thomas was used in this episode. In this one, he goes out of his way to help someone in need. In this case, one of the railway inspectors after he left his watch behind. That was a really sweet thing for Thomas to do. I also really like how he was used in Thomas the Babysitter as well. But I've already gone in depth about the episode before my Season 19 review. Season 20 is a contender for the best CGI season, because it is everything we could want in a season like this. The animation is peak, the returnees and newbies from Lost Treasure get some time in the spotlight. Thomas doesn't have a speaking role in some of the episodes this season despite appearing in all of them. This season does so much right. Hell, it even adapts 3 stories from the Railway series and brings back Lynn the Coffeeboard engine. Yeesh, what a season this one was. And need I even mention the amount of gems this season has? Tit for Tat, Mike's Whistle, Useful Railway, The Christmas Coffee Pot, Over the Hill, Cautious Connor, Pounty James, All in Vain, Skip of the Mermaid, Letters to Santa, and loads of others this season. You could easily tell that the team at Hit and Mattel were putting their all into this season. And that was because this season was intended to be the last one, period. According to this leak on Soda Island forums. But you know Mattel. They won't let Thomas stop for as much as they like. As for my favourite episode this season, I was so tempted to go for one of the 3 miniature engine stories this season. But I had to go with Bradford the Brake Fan as my favourite. I just love the concept of Bradford. He's basically the Barry Sergeant Major Williams of the Thomas universe. Oh yeah, I went there. And Ron Rackstraw does such an outstanding job as the character. I'm glad he was brought onto the show in the previous season and The Adventure Begins, albeit being the US dub of that movie. Tit for Tat, Mike's Whistle, and Useful Railway, though, are a very close second, for they are the first Railway series stories to be adapted since Season 4's Mind That Bike. All in all though, Season 20 is without a doubt one of, if not the best CGI season of Thomas. Season 21 was definitely an interesting season production-wise, as it was slated to have a 26 episode run like a lot of the seasons before. But 8 were cut short to make way for all the big world, big adventure stuff that would come out the following year. But that doesn't stop this season from having such great episodes like Springtime for Diesel, Runaway Engine, Dowager Hat's Busy Day, Unscheduled Stops, and Daisy's Perfect Christmas as examples. But my personal favourite episode this season would have to be the fastest Ren engine on Sodor. The main reason being is the fact that Rosie has a speaking role again after being a background character in the past few seasons, along with a really nice looking new livery. Sure, it may not be as good as her old livery, but I quite like this new look, in addition to her gold headlamp she received in Percy's Lucky Day. But by far the best part of this episode was the crash sequence. This is by far James's biggest crash in the show yet, and it was quite an impressive one at that. First crashing into a field and now crashing into the back of Tidman's sheds. Jeez, James has been through quite the ringer in the CGI series. And now we have reached season 22, the first of the Blobber series. I still stand by the fact that the Blobber era was still quite a fun era. Sure, it's not without its flaws, and it's not as amazing as the classic and Brenner eras, but I still find it to be loads of fun. Season 22 is full of really good episodes. Number 1 Engine, Confusion Without Delay, Seeing is Believing, School of Duck, Hot the Truck, and An Engine of Many Colors as examples. But my favorite pick of this season, to no one's surprise, is Trusty Trunky. I just love the concept of an elephant helping an engine to get back on the rails, which was actually inspired by a real life event, believe it or not. Oh, and Ashima returned as well. That was absolutely mind-blowing back in 2018, as I really liked her role in The Great Race, despite it being kinda similar to Gator's role in Tale of the Brave. There are some other good episodes this season, but this one definitely stood out to me back then, and it still does nowadays. Season 23 is where things started to get interesting, as this was the point where I took a break from the show for a while until a year later. And after watching every episode of this and 24, damn! While this season ain't as good as season 22, it's still a nice season, with some really good episodes sprinkled in, like Free the Roads, Crowning Around, Chuckle Some Trucks, Heart of Gold, Wish You Were Here, The Digs and Discoveries 2-parter, and Rages Up the Rails as examples. But my favorite pick for best episode this season is Steam Team to the Rescue. While it ain't as great as some of the movies in the past, I do really enjoy this episode. For being the first double-legged episode taking place on Sonar, it's a great one. I like the plot, some of the scenes were quite tense, and I absolutely love Don't Stop. It gives off the whole teamwork vibe this episode gives. Though it's not without minor flaws. Like, why didn't the Fat Controller have more engines to help out? Wouldn't that have been more faster? Other than that, still a really great double-legged episode. And now we have come to the final season, at least for the time being, Season 24. The season that marked the 75th anniversary of the Railway series. And what a season it was. In fact, I nearly enjoyed every single episode this season. With the possible exception of Emily's best friend. Oh no, that episode didn't really click with me. Other than that, most of the episodes are great. So many gems here. Like Thomas's Fuzzy Friend, The Great Little Railway Show, Nia and the Unfriendly Elephant, Nia's Bright Idea, Sally's Second Chance, and the Cleo episodes as examples. But I don't think it should come as a surprise as to what my favorite Season 24 episode is. Yep, it's Thomas and the Royal Engine. Of all the episodes this season, this one definitely felt the most like a celebration of everything we love about Thomas. From the sheer amount of references, to the returnees, to the story and pacing, it generally feels very Railway series-like to me. But what makes this one so cool is that Prince Harry of all people made a live-action cameo at the beginning. That was such a cool thing Mattel put into this episode. And I quite like the new character of Duchess. She basically serves as the equivalent of Duchess of Hamilton from the Railway series. While it would have been more awesome to see Duchess of Hamilton, I still think what we got as a new character was alright at the end. And chronologically, this is the, currently, final ever episode of the original series. And there couldn't have been a more fitting way to end this wonderful show on a high note. Simply a fantastic episode, and easily the best of what Season 24 had to offer. That was certainly a lot of episodes to cover, but it was all worth it in the end. And I'm not done with these best episodes in every season thing just yet, as I'll also be doing this with the other 4 shows I love. But until then, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!